Hi, welcome to part 3 and 4 of deploying your Docker container up on Azure. As you might remember, in the first two parts, I've set up the Puppet Master, and we installed Puppet modules, which were responsible for the components which are needed on Azure for my app, and that's the Docker registry. We got the Redis cache, and we got the Azure Container Service Kubernetes cluster. So we got all those things in place, and what we want to do now is create a CI/CD pipeline in VSTS, so we can deploy or build our project and deploy it on Kubernetes. So what we will do first is log in to VSTS. So here we got Visual Studio site. Let's go to sign in. I'm choosing a workspace which I created before. And in the workspace I'm saying I like to create a new project. And my project name will be called MSBF Demo 1. Not going to do anything with the process at the moment, but we will do this in a later stage. Create project. So the cool thing about this in comparison to other solutions is that this is a complete SaaS solution. You don't need to configure anything. The only thing what I needed for myself and for this project is an old build agent, because let's navigate to the project. Usually you can have hosted build agents within VSTS, and means you get a certain amount of minutes where you can build your projects on. But what I chosen is an own build agent, and this build agent has been already provisioned in the first step of this demo. So when you go back to the first part in my repository on GitHub, you see that I've created a Puppet Master. And in the Puppet Master I showed you a masterless build which created a build agent, and this build agent had a provisioning script, and this provisioning script made sure that all the stuff I needed for this part of the demo is already installed. So there is a user VSTS. You can see my hard-coded password, which I already also told you that there are other solutions for it. Docker is installed on this machine. I've installed the Kubernetes client, and I did some other cool stuff which makes it easy for you to set up this phase. So when we go back to the wizard, we say we like to start by adding code. And instead of using the private repositories by VSTS or the private Git, we are going to use GitHub in this case, because this is where my demo is. Let's click on the click or download button, paste it over here, say import. So this will take about a minute or so usually. Oh, it's done. I'm an impatient guy. I'm now going to configure the connection between my build agent and VSTS. So I'm going to go to my settings. I'm going to agent queues, and I say I like to have a new queue. Create a new pool, MSBF Demo 1. Okay. Going here. I'm logging into my build agent with the user I created in my provisioning script. You see my hard-coded password. Clicking it here. You see when I do Docker, it's already installed. So what I also did in the provisioning phase is create a directory called build agent, and there you see that there is a config.sh script. It will ask if I accept the agreement. I have to respond with a capital Y. And then it will ask for the server URL. And the server URL is basically the workspace URL where you got your VSTS stuff. I will say OK for the personal authentication token, and then I need to enter the token. And what I do is I'm clicking on my avatar, I'm going to security. There I click on personal access tokens, and I like to add one. I'm going to call MSBF demo. I will say it's valid for a year, and not touching any of these authorization things. I'm saying this is just fine by me. So be careful with this thing, it's only visible once. Say OK, pasting it over here, connecting to server. Then it's important that I'm using the name I just entered, MSBF demo. Then there's a name for a suggestion for the build agent, and I will say build agent 1, the host name is just fine by me. Let's go already to build agent release. Oh, agent pools, sorry about that. To the one I just created. Oh, this is the one. No, this is the one. Ah, this is an old one. Let's just remove it. That's just okay. Let's say enter. You see, it becomes visible over here, but it says it's offline, and that's because it's not running. So if I want to run this agent, I'm going to put a no hub run.sh, and I'm putting it in the background. So it's now listening for jobs. You will see it's idle. We can use this machine. So another thing what we need to do is we want from this build agent, we want to have a connection to the Kubernetes cluster we created before. And we created this Kubernetes cluster with from the Puppet machine. So what I'm going to do is what I need to do is adding this SSH key from this user to the Kubernetes machine. So I'm going to my home directory. ID rsa.pub. I'm copying the key. And then I'm exiting this, and I'm now back in my Puppet Master. And from this Puppet Master I like to connect to my Kubernetes master, and that's this guy. So when you created your Kubernetes cluster, so we called it MSBF Cube 1. You will see here the master, and when you look in the scripts you will see that it's been created with the Azure user, and the key from the Puppet Master is already in the authorized host file for this machine. So I can just SSH to this machine without a problem, and I'm adding the key of the VSTS user to this one. I'm exiting here, I'm going back to my VSTS machine. So, and now I like to test if I'm able to access this machine without a password as well. It's a terminal setting. Okay, let's go here. Let's just copy this part, SSH. Oh, and I have to do it as the Azure user at yes, that's working. So the cool thing, what I need to do now in order to communicate with the Kubernetes cluster is I'm copying a config file which resides on the Kubernetes master, and I'm copying to my local .kube directory. So I will say secure copy this guy .kube .config, and I like to copy it into my own home directory .kube. I'm copying this guy .kube and I'm copying it here. Hop. Okay, one moment please. Oh, I see that I made a typo. Let's go back. From here I'm copying from the home directory .kube config, and I'm copying it over here. So I have a look at this file. It contains a bunch of magic keys, but those magic keys are needed to communicate to the nodes within the Kubernetes cluster. So let's see if I can do the Kubernetes control get pods. There is nothing at the moment. Kubernetes get pods min o white kubectl get nodes, and there you see the machines which are available within the cluster. So cool stuff. So that's one part. Let's go back to VSTS. So we got our build agent in place, and we need to have, you like to configure a build now. So let's go to build and release. Overview. I have to be in my project, of course, which is this one. Builds. I'm going to create a new definition, starting with an empty template. I'm using a remote Git repository. Let's see. I have to choose the proper folder. Okay. Okay, one of the first things you will see, it's complaining about the repository. So I have no repository configured in place yet. I'm saying it's on GitHub, and let's see, there is no connection configured yet. So what I do is I click on manage, and I say I need to have a new service endpoint. Then I will say I'm choosing GitHub, and I need to authorize myself. Okay, that went very quick, but I've got my connection configured here. Let's say it's MSBF demo GitHub connection. Okay. So in a later phase, I'm also needing the connection to my Docker repository. So I'm Docker registry. So I'm adding this endpoint at the moment as well, because It's just a matter of time. So the connection name MSBF, let's just give it a name, demo1 Docker registry. I don't remember the exact details, so what I'm doing is I'm going back to my resource group where my Docker registry resides, which we created in the previous steps. I'm selecting the Docker registry, or the container registry it's called. Selecting the access keys. I need to enable an admin user. Here I got the URL. Copying this guy, pasting it over here. Docker ID is my username, and this thing is the key. So that's okay by me. I can close this now. Paste. Oh, don't know what happens. Clicking OK. So that's cool stuff. We got a connection to the Docker registry. We got a connection to GitHub. Let's go back to the overview again. We were busy with builds. We were busy with a new definition. We said we wanted to have an empty one. Remote repository. We say msfbf1. Create. Let's go back to the repository. We say it's GitHub. Now you see the configured connection, and I'm happy with this. Oh, I'm not quite happy with this. I have to choose the proper repository, because with this connection I configured I got multiple repositories, but I like to use the MSF body finder one. I say save. Demo 1. Okay. Let's add a build step. So I'm cheating a little bit over here, because here in my screen you see the Docker options. Initially you will not see them, and what you just need to do is click on this link, check out the marketplace. There you see a lot of solutions which are available for you. I think most of them are just free of usage. Anyway, the one from Docker is. Close it. So I say I'm going to do some cool stuff with Docker. Add. Close. Here I'm configuring which connection I'm going to use, because eventually I want to push my stuff in this Docker registry. Hostname -f. Hostname. So I'm here on the build agent, and when I do a Docker images, you will see there are no images at the moment on this build agent. So we just start by building an image, and I am doing this with a Docker file, and this Docker file is in the number 4 in my repository under code. And let's just start with the Nginx project, and there you find the Docker file. So use default bind context, and what I like to do is I like to call this thing msbf demo1 demo, and identified with Nginx, and this is just the number from the build it will give as a tag. Let's say save. Okay. The next step what I would like to do is I like to once I've built this Docker image, I like to push it to the Docker registry. So I'm adding another build step, and I say add, close, and I'm saying it's not build an image. This is called pushing image to repo. Okay. Again, I'm saying you need to use this Docker registry, and I say push the image, and the image name is msbf demo nginx. Just to be sure that I use the same one. Let's say save as drive. Yeah, that's the same one. Okay, that's okay. So let's just first test if this all is working, and then the next step is of course pushing this to the Kubernetes cluster. So let's say Q new build. This guy, say okay. Yes. So this is all looking pretty great. If you would like to have a look at the source code, we will need to change it later on in a later phase, because it's now configured to use my Redis cache, and I didn't give you my password, of course, and eventually you want to use your own Redis cache. So, but when you have a look at the project, in the meantime it's still building. This is the Docker file, and I'm saying, okay, here are the stuff you need for the code, and it's just running a simple Node.js thingy. Yeah, the Nginx part, that's all legacy stuff, because in my previous demo I used Nginx, but I changed it because I'm using Socket.io, and with Socket.io I'm using a pure a WebSocket API implementation of Node.js. So don't worry about that. You will also see that the initial build will take a little bit longer than expected, because in the initial build it will create the initial image, but all the sequential builds will be a lot quicker. You will see that soon, because the initial image is already there, of course, and it only will need to build the stuff that has been changed. So it's now on 25%. Let's see what happened in the meantime over here. In the meantime, you will see that the image where it was built on or based on, it's already there. But if you've seen my Docker file, you see that it also does some kind of installation commands. So it's installing these commands on this image, and then it will create the image, the sequential image, which contains my code. So no reason for you to wait for this. I'm just pausing a little bit, and when it's there I will continue. So it appears I made a little boo-boo over here, and I also took the time to figure out what it was. So here you see it says you're unauthorized, and I got authentication required, and I was like, wow, what's that? I configured my my Docker registry connection, right? So what I didn't do is, when you push your image, you have to do it within the right context, and the right context is being this user. So when I tag my image, I have to say, okay, you have to have this as a base tag, and then you give your image the proper name. So let's reconfigure it. I'm going to edit the build definition. And build image. I'm saying in my image name it should be this guy. And then here, when I push it, it should be this guy. And then I say save. And then I say queue new build and go for it. Oh, apparently I didn't save it. Now it's saved. Queue new build. Let's go. Oh man. So I've discovered my sins. What I did wrong here is the following. When I configured my build, I should have put the complete URL here and not just the username. That's because I'm not working with GitHub but with a private repository. And when you work with a private repository, you have to fill in the complete details. So if you see the login server URI that is created during the visit, it's your username and then Microsoft.Azure CRIO. And this stuff should be in front of your image name and here. So when we on the build machine do now Docker images, we will see that this is the base image, and on this base image I've created my own image with tag number 144, which corresponds with the build number. So what we want to do now is deploy this on the Kubernetes cluster, because when we do a kubectl get pods, there is nothing running yet. The problem at the moment, or it's not really a problem, is that the Kubernetes cluster is not aware of the existence of the Docker registry. So what we need to do is create a secret, and that sounds very secretive, but what you do is with this command kubectl create secret Docker registry, then I'm giving it a name, and then the name of the server is, I'm copying that over here, it's this thing, because this is my private Docker registry. Then the Docker username is this thing. You see, I'm not very creative, not in this phase anyway. And here I'm pasting the password. So with this command I can let my Kubernetes clusters or deployments know that there is this secret they can use, and with this secret they can deploy and get the images from the Docker registry, the private Docker registry that is. So let's see, do I have it in my GitHub? I don't think so yet. I have to do that. So one moment please. So when you go to the source code, let me see, and you go to the deploy folder, you will see that there is a YAML file, and this YAML file contains the name of the application, on how many nodes it will run. Here's the image name, and this is of course referring to the image which will be used in the deployment. Then I'm passing it some parameters, because these parameters are are being used in your deployment for the Redis cache. And here you see I'm referring to the secret I mentioned earlier. And this Kubernetes deployment knows it has to deploy it on the private Docker registry. So let's go back to deploy. I've got the deploy.sh shell script. And here you see what I'm doing is I'm passing it a couple of parameters: the application name, Docker image name, build number name, Redis URL, and Redis password. And then it will change the YAML file, and this YAML file will be deployed on the Kubernetes cluster with this command. So basically it's just a shell script I'm executing in my build phase. So what I do is I'm going to build. I'm adding a build step, and I say it's a utility. I'm running a shell script. Close. Where is this shell script? It's on 04 code. It's on the Nginx. It's in deploy. It's deploy.sh. And then I'm having to pass these parameters. So application name is MSBF demo Nginx. Docker image, I'm just using the same one. This should be, of course, the image name which we are using here. The build ID, it's the third parameter. Then we need to have the Redis URL and the Redis password. So I'm going to need to go back to my resource group, and I'm going to the Redis Redis cache. I've created this one in the first part of the demo. I'm going to access keys. I just need this part, the URL. And then I need to have the password, which is this guy or the one below. That's both fine by me. Wow, a lot of parameters, but cool stuff, I believe. Let's save it. No clue what's happening now. Save. Okay. Let's queue the build. In the time I will do a watch kubectl get pods min -o wide. So of course you will see no resources found. Oh damn it, I see something here again. I'm unauthorized. One moment please. So now my boo-boo was that I made an error in my shell script, and that's all on me, of course. So when I've added the argument, what I did wrong is the third parameter is the parameter for the Docker image name, and the image name consists of a slash, And what I'm doing in my shell script, I'm setting it, replacing this sign, and in order to escape this you have to do a backslash. So that was the whole reason for failing. Let's just build it again. Q new build. I've changed that sign. Yes, go for it. So in the back I'm doing this command, kubectl get pods -o white, which will also show you the position of the node. Apparently, in the meantime, I also rebooted my my agent, and the reason for that was because I've added a trigger that my agent should shut down itself every day at 11 o'clock, and it's 11 o'clock in Holland, so no hub run.sh en passant. I do watch kubectl get pods -o white, nothing running. So let's see what's happening here. My build should be starting. Yep. So as you remember, it will build the Docker image, then it will push it to the private Docker repository, then I'm passing this wow, this YAML file which deploys the Kubernetes, which deploys it to the Kubernetes cluster. So the last part for this demo is what I want to do is expose this application as a website or as a web app, and now it's all fine and running within the Kubernetes cluster, but I like to expose it as a service and make it available for the demo. So when I do a kubectl get service, you see there's only the master service running, but there is no service exposed, and also not exposed on Azure yet. So we are now in the build agent folder of the build machine, and I'm going to the work directory, and in the work directory you will find your source codes which has been checked out under the 04 VSTS. You will find the code, and then we will go to the Nginx project. I didn't automate this because I don't think this should be an automated task, but I'm just showing you can automate it as well. So let's go to the deploy folder, and there you see I already prepared a template for you. And in this template I'm saying, okay, I like to expose this via port 80. It will be of the type load balancer, but then I need to use the proper name of my image, and the proper name of the Kubernetes name is, let's see here, how did I call it? I'm referring it to as this guy. So I'm just changing ms body finder nginx lb.yaml ms. So this is a different name. Service. I can just do a kubectl create -f, pass this parameter, this file as a parameter, watch kubectl get service. So you see it immediately created a cluster IP for this service, but it's now pending as a external IP. Because I gave the type load balancer, Kubernetes knows that it needs to create an Azure load balancer to reach it on the outside. So this usually will take a couple of minutes because it's a public IP address. But this will be done within the Kubernetes resource group. So let me pause, and when this has been created, I will show you, and that will be the end of the demo. So we're a couple of minutes later. You see there's a new load balancer created in Azure. And here you see it in the service overview of Kubernetes as well. So when I'm going to this IP address under port 80, you should be able to see my beautiful application running. So that's about this for this demo. In the last part I will show you how to configure and install an elk stack on Kubernetes. For now, this is the end of this part of the demo. Hope you like it.